We've recently seen a growing chorus, especially in the US, for us to essentially soak the rich, quote unquote. Essentially that means taking away from the rich and giving to poorer people, or simply people of lesser means. And naturally, this is seen as a way to lessen the impacts of inequality in society, lessen those impacts and equalize things so that we can all be happier and healthier, ideally. And the implicit and explicit assumption here, of course, is that the rich are sitting on money or piles of cash or however you want to imagine it, that they don't need access to. They simply don't need that much money, and then in some manner, it's an inefficient use of resources. I want to tackle this question specifically in the framework of there being two sides to every single transaction. Any transaction you can imagine, there are always two sides to it. And in the examples that follow, I don't mean to apologize for the system. I don't mean to say that the system is fair or that it's necessarily the best one that we have or that it's worth defending or that it's not worth attacking at all. I think the system definitely needs some improvement. My one caveat for you when thinking about these kind of issues, when thinking about redistribution or just thinking about the two sides to every single argument, one of the reasons the system is the way that it is because of efficiency. The system is run currently because it is the most efficient use of resources. And upsetting what we might term a balance or simply the status quo could actually result in a worse outcome for everyone on the level of the society. So what do I mean by this really lengthy introduction? Okay, so we can start off with the most banal example there is. With any product or service, we have a buyer and we have a seller. However, we only have one price to mediate both. So how does that work out? Well, even from a very young age, we have actually quite a strong concept of what value is and what is fair. And we understand how money works from very early on, and this builds, of course, throughout our lives. And so any time we're buying something, generally speaking, we get more value out of it, however you measure that value, over and above what we pay for it. Fair enough, that's nice and easy. And so a similar story with a seller. The seller is selling something specifically because their costs are covered, they're making some sort of profit, and it's worth it for them to be in the market to actually provide that good or that service. But we can actually go deeper. What about the example of Sony, which actually underprices its PlayStations to actually get more money out of people in the long run? What happens there? So how that works is that through really complex formulas, complex charts, graphs, and lots of boardroom meetings, Sony has determined that they can lower the price below cost for their PlayStation, which is a saving for the rest of us, we all pay less. However, in the long run, they make more money from their ancillary services than they would if they had charged a fairer price for the PlayStation in the first place. Now, of course, that might not have applied to you specifically. You might actually have spent less on the PlayStation due to the price cuts from Sony. However, you're not the intended audience in this specific instance. The intended audience is what the gaming industry lovingly calls whales, or simply the majority of people who will pay more over the long term for stuff like PlayStation Now and so on. Because they've lowered the price, it lowers the barriers to entry for people to get into what they call the Sony ecosystem, and then it makes it easier to spend more money after. So that is one sense in which we have a complex dynamic going on. Yes, Sony is selling the PlayStation for less than cost, and this saves some people money because they're spending less money overall, even in the long term. However, this is only happening because these lower prices are being paid for by someone else. Someone else ultimately, even if it's unwittingly, they're essentially subsidizing you getting the PlayStation for cheaper. And this is what I mean by there being two sides to every argument. This is what I mean by it's more complex than that. But we can actually go a bit further. What about getting something for free? I mean, that's great, isn't it? If something's being provided for free, that means I get more purchasing power. That's more money to me, I can save more. There's other things which I can now pay for, which are more important than whatever it is that I am getting for free. And so my overall welfare is increased, I'm better off. The most common way we interact with free is with parking. Now, free parking sounds amazing, and it sounds like a no-brainer. Everyone wins in this scenario, right? But let's actually go deeper. How and where is that parking being provided for free? See, where is the parking lot? It's not in the outskirts of a city. It's not out in the desert, it's not out in the plain, it's not on a farmland. It's oftentimes in the middle of cities, or very close to the middle of a city, where it's needed the most. However, that land is valuable, specifically because it's a valuable commodity in the middle of a city. Land is in short supply in a city. So what happens now? A developer buys a plot of land and they have to provide free parking. Let's say it's mandated by the government. So they have to set aside a bit of the land to then provide for free. That then leaves less land for the attached building. That building being smaller means less revenue overall for the developer. The developer, of course, doesn't take this lying down, so one way to make up their money is to then charge higher prices than they normally would, given the fact that they have to make the building smaller. Those higher prices then get translated into the services in the building. If it's for the government, that means the government is paying higher rent. If it's for businesses going in, that means those businesses pay higher rent. If it's for an apartment, that means you're paying more for your rent or more for your mortgage to get an apartment in that building. And so the simple act of providing parking has actually pushed up prices in the attached building. Okay, so that's a private developer. What about the government? Let's say the government builds the building. Well, okay, the government contracts out a developer to build this building. But once again, we have a building height limit and we have a limited amount of land that we can build that building on. And so that means the only way the government can provide that parking for free is by using taxpayer money. That means taxpayers overall are subsidizing the use of that car park, even if you're a taxpayer and you never use that car park. And it could also get worse than that. You could be a taxpayer who's helping subsidize that car park. However, you could also catch public transport to that building and just pay higher prices in that building. And so you're hit with a double whammy. And this is what I mean by it being much more complex. But let's actually go in the opposite direction. Let's consider higher prices or higher than normal prices. So a classic example here is Apple. Most people agree that Apple overcharges for its product. Does this then mean there are fat cat executives at the top of Apple who are raking in all of those extra profits and getting super rich as a result? Not really. Certainly some of that is happening. I don't mean to take that away. However, a lot of those extra profits, what economists like to call economic rent, a lot of those actually go to employees and capital. So what do I mean by this? Well, a lot of those rents go in the form of higher wages that you get by working in Apple, but also in hiring more people than Apple could otherwise hire if their prices were lower. But it also goes in R&D, which once again is people. People have to be paid to do the research and development, but it also goes to equipment and machinery. Apple has to order its equipment and machinery from someone, and it could get that machinery from a business that you work at. And I'll give you an example. So let's say you're a customer, you purchase something from Apple and you're overpaying. Some of those profits will then go towards extra machinery that Apple will now buy, and they could then purchase machinery from a place that you work at. Your business then sees increased sales as a result of those extra prices. So whether or not something is too expensive or something is free, the situation is not clean and cut and dry. And if you're going to be intellectually honest, you have to analyze both sides of the argument. So of course monopolies are bad and they tend to undersupply and tend to overprice their products. However, we could actually get into natural monopolies, whereby breaking up natural monopolies would be a bad sign, and that would then lead to economic inefficiencies. And so in general, with most industries, we want there to be enough competition so we don't get situations like free parking is provided, which causes distortions elsewhere in the economy and can hit some people, especially low-income earners, disproportionately. But we also want competition so that what we call economic rents, they are absorbed completely by capital and by workers, and so that we don't get fat cats at the top of big businesses taking all the money and raking it in and then living up the high life at the expense of everyone else. But with that in mind, let's actually go back to the question I started with. Can we take from the rich and can we then give to the poor? It's easy to imagine not just rich business owners, but rich people in general, that they're sitting on hordes of money or hordes of cash or simply just wealth, and that they don't need access to that wealth, and that it would be better overall for a society if there was more redistribution. So the first thing to get out of the way is that we already have redistribution. Virtually every society around the world. So we already have taxes and we already have government programs which tend to tax the rich higher and redistribute that over to poorer people. Fair enough. What we're talking about here is over and above that. So we want to take more from the rich. But what are the rich actually doing with their money? So the vast majority of rich people are investing their money to, you guessed it, earn more money. This might sound selfish and greedy. However, you've got to consider this. How and why are they doing that? First and foremost, most rich people, or certainly the ones that we would want to take more money from, they're not doing this themselves. People are doing it on their behalf, and more specifically, they are investing that money somewhere in the economy to get that return. You don't get a return on your money by magic. The only way you can get a return on your money is if somewhere in the economy we see some sort of growth. Whether or not this is good or bad growth is up for debate. For example, you might be morally opposed to, let's say, a large military contract. Fair enough. But I'm just talking about growth in general. Extra growth is required if the rich person or even you, if you're to see some sort of return on your money, you have to be invested somewhere in the economy. And this could be something as simple as, let's say you have $10,000 and you invest that in a friend's business. Let's say the friend's business takes off and he becomes rich. As a result, you will then also share in the benefit. You will get a return on your money. But the only reason you're getting a return on your money is because you took a risk on investing your money. There was a chance you could lose all $10,000. But you took that risk, the business grew, that also grew wealth for society, and you get to participate in some of that extra wealth that you helped grow. Absent the money that your friend got from you, they could not have started that business, they could not have grown that business, and that new wealth would not have been created. The same is true for most rich people and their money. It's just on a larger scale. Somewhere down the line, that money is being used to fund projects or to fund other businesses. If you then take that money away from them over and above what we're already taking from rich people, and then you give to poorer people, two things could result from it. If nothing else in the economy changes, and all we're doing is changing the ownership of this money, of this wealth, we could just see higher prices. Remember, the amount of goods and services in the economy has stayed the same. We've just given this money to people who are more likely to consume it, and they could bid up prices and cause inflation to go up, which would then make everyone worse off. But of course, you could consider it in the other direction. You don't have to consume that money. You could then invest that money and you could start your own business. And this is undoubtedly true. There are currently people now who have business ideas who don't have access to credit to start that business, and they could be constrained by the fact that rich people are hoarding more money. However, we all know someone who would love to start a business or has some sort of business idea that they want to start in the future if only they can get access to credit. And we all know people like this who should never start a business. They simply don't have the business acumen, they don't have the experience, and they just don't know what it takes. And these are precisely the people we don't want to give money to. We don't want people to get resources to start businesses that were doomed from the start. The same way we don't want zombie businesses being kept afloat by cheap credit. And it's entirely possible people like that have already tried to get credit for their business idea and have been turned down precisely for this reason. They've gone to a bank or some sort of financial institution to get a loan. The bank has assessed them and decided, you know what, this person simply could not run a business and it's not worth us extending credit to this person. And this is what I mean by it not being so cut and dry. Once again, I want to reiterate, this is not to apologize for rich people. This is not to say that the current system is amazing, that it's the best we can do, or that it doesn't need improvement. What I am saying is that it could currently be the most efficient use of resources. And that's simply taking from rich people and giving to poorer people, and might have far greater and more far-reaching consequences than we can imagine. And this could constitute one of the reasons why we don't take extra from the rich. Now, of course, there are greedy people, there are people with ill-gotten gains, and there are powerful people who naturally don't want more of their wealth being taken from them. However, one part of the reason we don't take more from the rich is this efficiency issue. Of course, this doesn't mean that economics is not concerned with fairness, or that it's focused exclusively on efficiency. So we could take from the rich and give to poorer people, and this might result in more fairness. However, the loss of efficiency for the economy as a whole could be greater, and we could inadvertently sacrifice that fairness because of the unintended consequences of taking from the rich, and we could eventually make everyone worse off. And this complexity and nuance that I presented in this video is precisely what I want you to take away from it. There might indeed be a good reason for the current status quo, for why things are the way they are, beyond just greedy people or selfish people or people who have a vested interest in perpetuating the system. When thinking about any economic issue, including taking more from the rich and giving to the poor, part of the reason the system is the way that it is because currently it represents the best and most efficient use of resources. And that makes everyone, even if some people are missing out, it makes more people on the whole better off. And that is how I'll end off this video. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, rate and share all the good stuff. Definitely helps my channel, and I'll see you guys next time.